I'm going to talk to you today about making stamps. There are many different ways that you can make stamps. You can make stamps that press into the clay and are compact like this, or you can make rollers that are like this. They can be big. This pattern was taken from fabric. This one was actually carved on. There's some considerations that you need to think about before you start to carve your stamp. The things that I want you to think about are everything is kind of opposite when you make a stamp. So if you carve it concave, it's going to leave a convex surface on your clay. If you carve it around and leave a convex shape, then in your clay it's going to make an impression in and leave a concave area in the clay. So think about that as you create your stamp. The other thing to really keep in mind, it's very important, is the fact that you need to create it in a mirror image. So I've written my last name, DeMello, here backwards. So if you're going to do the letter J, you need to think about how it's going to be backwards. You don't have to worry if you're doing the letter A, or the letter I, or the letter M, but you are going to have to worry about the letter N. Okay, so you want to write backwards if you're going to be doing letters. All right, so let's get started. I've rolled a small cylinder here, and I'm going to tap the edges down so that I have a nice flat surface. How my stamp looks is really not that important, but if you want to make it a really useful stamp, you've got basically three surfaces you can work on. You've got this outside surface, which could become a small roller. You've got two ends that you can work on. So I was looking for a stamp today and I couldn't find it. And I thought, oh, well, I guess I'll just make another one. So that's what I'm going to do. I like to stamp hearts into things. I don't really like to carve them. So I'm going to draw a heart shape onto the bottom of this rolling stamp. Now, the line that I've left behind here is pretty narrow. It's not going to leave that much of an impression. Once this is dry and has been bisque fired, it won't leave much of an impression in the clay. Take a look at this stamp here and how deep the nooks and crannies are. This is the depth that we're looking for, and also the thickness of the lines. Look how thick the lines are. That's again what I'm going for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very carefully find some sort of tool. In this case, I'm using something called a fettling knife. And I'm going to pull the clay away so that I make a concave design. What that means is when I stamp this into the clay, it's going to make a convex heart. So it's going to be a puffy heart. As I carve, I want to keep the inside of my shape the same depth. I do not want to increase the depth too much. I want to make sure that as I carve this, it's nice and even on the inside. Waiting until your clay is a bit harder, so right now this clay is pretty soft, will also yield perhaps better results. And I am going to wait a little bit for this to dry a little bit, just so that I can clean up inside here. I think I can do a little bit now with the knife. Okay, that's looking better. I'll get that clay out. Okay, so it needs a little more cleaning. I'm going to wait. I want to make sure that my edges along the sides here are sharp, so that as I press it into the clay, I get a really nice impression. So I feel like I'm just messing this up at the moment. I'm going to come back to this side a little bit later. Now on this other side, let's say I want to do another heart. So I'm going to draw that in. I'm going to make this one bigger. And what I'm going to do now, and in this case I'm going to use a small blade. So if you have an X-Acto knife, now would be a really good time to pull that out and use it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull away clay and leave my heart as a convex shape that I will stamp into the clay, which will make a concave heart. Another thing you want to be careful of is you want to push down these ends that are sticking up so that really the only thing that you're going to press into the clay is the heart itself. If those edges are too pointy, they're going to leave an impression also in the clay, which you'll probably want to clean up at the end. So save yourself some work and just make a stamp that's going to just press the shape into the clay. Okay, so there's my heart, which is convex. When I right now it's convex, and then when I press it into the clay, it will leave behind a concave impression. And here's my concave heart, which I'm still working on, which is going to leave a sweet little puffy heart or a convex heart behind in the clay when I press it in. But I'm not going to test it now. I'm just going to make sure that it's at least 1/8 of an inch deep, maybe even approaching 1/4 of an inch deep. You don't want to go super deep, but you also don't want to go shallow. Remember, take a look at some stamps at home if you need some help, if you have a stamp at home. Okay. All right. Now I'm just going to push those ends in again. Now I have a double-sided heart stamp that just needs a little cleaning up, which I'll wait and do when the clay is a bit harder. In order to smooth the inside of my heart, I found that this tiny wooden stylus did the job beautifully. So I used the round end to go into the round end of the heart, the round part of the heart, and I use it to press down on the clay and create a nice smooth interior. I make sure that there's no lip sticking up on the sides, and then I can take the other end and I can use it to press down the pointy end of the heart. So now the inside of my heart is nice and smooth, and on this side I have taken the wooden stylus as well and run it along the edge of the heart to make sure that this heart has a really good edge for pressing into the clay. And then I can run this along the side like this. Also getting rid of any little burrs or little tiny bits of clay that keep sticking to things. If you want a bit of a better point, you might want to get out your needle tool and use that to create a sharper point at the bottom of your heart. Sometimes the trick is knowing when to stop. If you want to make a series of stamps, you can roll a coil and cut some discs. And from these discs, you can shape them any way you want. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to elongate it a little bit and make it more of, I don't know, more of an oval shape. When I tap it down like that, it's to flatten my surface. You want to have a nice flat surface for stamping. I'm going to get any marks out of the way. And I'm not going to worry about a two-sided stamp on this one. I feel like it's going to be a little too hard because I made this so small. So I'm just going to make the back so that I can hold it and press it down nicely. I'm not worrying too much about what this looks like on the back, just smoothing it a little bit. But this is going to be my front surface here. And it's nice and flat. Now, what am I going to do? I'm going to take my homemade needle tool because I feel like this is a pretty good size for making lines that are going to print. And I'm going to try to go even depth. And then I'm going to try to clean these lines out. Again, my clay is a little bit on the sticky side. It's a bit wet. And that's why the clay is kind of gooping up a little bit. I'm going to add some little holes here for decoration and interest. And it looks a little bit like a little seed or something. I want to make sure that I don't have any edges sticking up that are going to leave a mark behind in my clay. So I'm also going to wait and clean this up a little bit when it's dried a little bit more. You want to make sure your lines are clean and of the same depth throughout the stamp. All right. Let's go for more of a geometric one. I'm tapping this into a square. I've made two triangles. Now I'm going to take a little bit away from the center. I'm going to use the back of my fettling knife, so not the sharp side of a knife. And I'm going to make some impressions and wiggle that line around a little bit to widen it a little bit. And then echo that line over here. I can turn this one into kind of a fan shape. And I can press into it here with something round so that I see where I need to stop. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the other stamp, the other geometric stamp. I'm going to make like a little sunrise pattern. That will press neatly into the clay and make a variety of patterns.